Anton Keats is perhaps the greatest member of the group of the second generation of Romantic poets, who blossomed early and died young. He is romantic in his enjoyment of sensation, his love for the Middle Ages and for the Greek civilization, his concept of the writer, but his synthesize he made of all these elements was very much his own. He was able to fuse the romantic passion and the cold neoclassicism, just as Hugo Foscolo did in Le Grazie. Keats was born in London in 1795 in a modest though reasonable well-off family. The first of 5 children, he attended a private school in Anfield, and following the early deaths of his father and mother, he decided to study to become a surgeon in 1810. 7 years later, in spite of precarious finances, he gave up medicine for poetry. Helped in his quest by the poet and radical editor of The Examiner, Layton, Keats soon became a friend of the leading writers and artists of this period, including Percy B. Shelley. In 1818, Endymion, a long mythological poem, appeared. This was a difficult time for Keats since his brother died because of tuberculosis, and his ever-frail health deteriorated rapidly. He also fell in love with Fanny Brougham, but poverty, his bad health, and his almost religious pursuit of poetry made marriage impossible. Notwithstanding these difficulties, Keats wrote a series of masterful poems during the following year. The Eve of Saint Agnes, characterized by those features which are conventionally called romantic. Here the atmosphere is the one of a symbolic Middle Age, where superstition, art, ritual and luxury form a background against which Avon threatens perfect love. The great odes, Ode to a Nightingale, Ode on Aggression on, to Autumn, Ode on a Melancholy and to Psyche, where the poet explores the relations between pleasure and pain, happiness and melancholy, art and life, reality and imagination. The ballad La Belle Dame sans Merci, which shows once more a taste for medieval themes and form. An Hyperion, begun in 1818 and published unfinished in 1820, which shows the influence of Milton in its sonorous blank verse. In 1820, the symptoms of tuberculosis became evident in Keats. In September of the same year, he traveled to Italy in an effort to recover his health, but died in Rome in February 1821. He was buried in the Protestant cemetery in Rome. So, he belongs to the second generation of Romantic poets, with Percy Shelley and Byron. They were friends. He experienced a lot of family losses. That's why mortality is one of his favorite themes. And another theme is beauty. Beauty is the main concept related to Keats, Victorian concept of art. So art for us says, when Keats died, he was hardly known outside his own literary circle, and even there it was taken for granted that his work was doomed to the total neglect and obscurity. Many years later, Matthew Arnold, the most important Victorian critic of English literature, said of Keats, he is with Shakespeare, and there has never been a more complete judgment. Unlike the lyrics of Shelley and Byron, Keats' lyrical poems are not fragments of a continual spiritual autobiography. It is true that the odes of 1819 contain some deeply felt personal experiences. However, these are not the substance but the background. The use of the poetical personal pronoun I is not linked to an individual within the context of his time, but stands for an universal I. His poetry rarely identifies scenes and landscape with subjective moods and emotions. There is no sense of mystery or wistful fantasy convention. For Keats, imagination had a supreme value, and it was this that made him a romantic poet. His idea of imagination was twofold. First, the world of his poetry is artificial, one that he imagines. Second, his poetry comes from imagination, meaning that Most of his work, even most of the odes, is a vision of what he would like human life to be, stimulated by his own experience of pain and misery. In Keats' view, the poet has negative capability. By this, he meant the poet's capability to deny his certainties and personality in order to identify with the object which he sees as the source of his inspiration and the place where truth lives. If the poet managed to rely on this negative capability, he can find sensations, which are the basis of knowledge leading to beauty and truth. This allows him to write poetry. But what about beauty? Beauty, the contemplation of beauty, is the central theme of Keats' poetry. What strikes his imagination most is beauty, and it is disinterested love for it that differentiates him from the other Romantic writers and makes him the forerunner of aestheticism. Keats drew much inspiration from the classical Greek world. To him, the expression of beauty is the ideal of all art. Thus, the Greek world lives again in his verse, recreated and reinterpreted with the eyes of a Romantic. His first awareness of beauty proceeds from the senses, from concrete physical sensations. All the senses are involved in this process. This physical beauty is caught in all nature's form, in the colors it displays, in the sweetness of its perfumes, in the shape of a flower, in a woman. Beauty can also produce a much deeper experience of joy, as Keats affirmed in the opening line of Endymion. A thing of beauty is a joy forever. This joy introduced a sort of spiritual beauty, that is the one of love, friendship and poetry. Physical beauty is linked to life, enjoyment, decay and death, while spiritual beauty is related to eternity. Keats identifies beauty and truth as the only true types of knowledge. One of his most famous ballads is La Belle Dame sans Merci. This is a Romantic ballad where the meeting between a knight and a beautiful lady becomes a metaphor of illness and love consumption. The title comes from an old French court poem by Alain Chartier. But what about Ode on a Grecian Urn? Many readers of this poem have wondered about the actual Grecian urn that inspired it, although scenes like those described in this poem can be found on several examples of Greek pottery surviving in museums. All the details combined together seem to have existed only in Keats' imagination. The ode celebrates the immortality of the urn, seen as a perfect work of art, and the immortality to be acquired through the art. The poet is addressing the Grecian urn. We have been introduced to a pastoral world. Imagination is superior to reality. Through imagination it is possible to create a better world. Keats describes a work of art, and since art is eternal, time doesn't exist. Therefore, trees are always green. Nature is flourishing. The boy is in love. The girl is young and beautiful. This perfect scene is frozen back. The boy can reach the beloved. Therefore, what is missing in the world of art is pleasure. Each stanza is formed by 10 lines. In all stanzas we have a quatrain and a sextet. In the first 3 stanzas we are in a vault, where there are 2 lovers very young. In this poem we have lots of conches. The main one is the conches between real life linked to death and art related to eternity, which is out of time. From the point of view of language, is quite archaic. This contributes to the elevated tone of the ode. The inspiration for this work of the whole of ode probably came to Keats by looking at some art at the British Museum. The idea of that is present already in the title. As you know, a urn is a vase used to contain ashes of dead bodies, which refers to the urn as called the pastoral, For an objective reason, the urn is made of marble, that is called, but metaphorically speaking, as the urn is a work of art, and art is out of time, art can sympathize with life. Art is totally indifferent at human sorrows. It has nothing to do with that, and with time. In fact, when you contemplate a work of art, you can find a refuge away the sorrow of life. His poetry is sensorial. Not sensual, but sensorial. He was very good at reproducing images linked to the five senses that play an important role in his text.